Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. And remember, if you like what you hear, please press the subscribe button below. I appreciate it. If you have any other questions I might be able to address for you in a future episode, leave a comment below and I see what I can do. Today's topic is God. What's the deal with God? I know in our society today, there are a lot of Christians, people of other faiths, and there's also a lot of non-believers, atheists, agnostics, people who don't seem to come to grips with the idea of God as being real. Well, I'm going to try to show you why there is a God. All right, so the first question you have to ask on this subject is, well, why do you need a God? What do you need a God for? Isn't the laws of physics and science good enough to answer every conceivable question out there? What do you need a God for? Well, the answer is that there is a limitation on science and physics. Science and physics cannot explain its own existence. And because of that, there has to be something else. And we call that something else God. When I talk about God, I need to make sure that you and I are on the same page, because God doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Okay? God. G-O-D. God. Now, when some people hear the word God, they think of some sort of mythological being like Zeus on Mount Olympus. Some old man with a really long beard sitting on a golden throne deciding the fate of everything. Okay? A very, a deity, human-like deity. All right. That's not what most people mean when they talk about God in a strictly theological sense. Those sorts of mythological gods, the pantheon of gods you might find in ancient Greece or in all sorts of cultures, those gods aren't real. Period. They're fictions. Because you can always ask yourself, well, who created that guy? Okay, you got Zeus. All right, he's God. All right, well, who created Zeus? Well, if Zeus was created, then there must have been something greater than Zeus to create Zeus. So that means there must be another god above Zeus. Well, see, that you can use this argument ad infinitum. Who created the god that created Zeus? Keep going back and back and back, and you'll never find an end to it. So those sorts of mythological gods are easily refuted. The only God that makes any sense at all in our world today is a God that is necessary even in the realm of science. Now, a lot of people think science and modern physics eliminates the possibility of God. It does not. Science has limitations. Physics has limitations. Science and physics can only study that which you can experiment on, that which is accessible to scientists. If you start asking questions about, well, what about what was before the Big Bang? What happened? Why is the universe even here to begin with? There's no way science can address those questions with experiments, because you can't leave the universe and go find something else outside to answer those questions. It's not possible. Physically, it's physically impossible. So science has limitations. It can only experiment on what is here, and that's it. So, if there are further questions, and there are, you have to address them with what philosophers call metaphysics. So, there's physics, and then there's metaphysics. Okay? Physics, the realm of science. Metaphysics. Meta, meaning beyond physics, beyond the physical. Metaphysical. This addresses the biggest questions there are. And this is used by philosophers mostly, but the conclusions that are drawn from metaphysics are ones based on logic and reasoning. So you see a lot of logic, reasoning, okay, deduction. When it comes to metaphysics, because you can't do experiments in the realm of metaphysics, because you can't get there to do the actual experiments. It's physically impossible. So you have to go to metaphysics to answer these big questions, like, who is God? Okay. So, the first question is, all right, in the scientific age, why do we need a God? All right. Well, let's think about this. Yeah, let me erase this board first. All right, well, let's think. What are the only possibilities? Let's think about that. What the world is. What are the possibilities? What could they possibly be? Well, there's three possibilities. The first possibility is absolute nothingness. Okay, absolute nothingness. This means there's nothing, there never was anything, there never will be anything. Well, we know that is not the case because we're here. But it's a possibility, nonetheless. Now, what do you need to cause absolute nothingness? Nothing. It would just simply be the case. Thankfully, it's not the case. Clearly, it's not the case. But it's a possibility. It's one of the possibilities that you can think of that are uncaused. No cause needed. Absolute nothingness. What's another possible state that we could find ourselves in? Well, another possibility is everythingness. So, Everythingness. Now, what is everythingness? Everythingness means everything that is possible exists. Anything that you could possibly logically conceive of exists. Does that have to have a cause? Well, that's an interesting question, but that's another possibility. Now, we know that that is not obviously the case because not everything exists, right? I'm not standing here with two heads. Why? Because that doesn't exist. Well, if everything existed, I'd be standing here with at least two heads. So we know that everythingness, at least on its face, does not appear to be the case. All right, so what's a third possibility? Well, a third possibility is somethingness. Somethingness. Well, that certainly seems to be what we have going on, right? We got something, but we don't have everything. So it sure sounds like, this is what reality is. It's somethingness. It's some things, but it's not everything. Now, it's important to note that somethingness is a part of everythingness. So if I were to say, would something like what we have here be included in everything there is, or could be? And the answer is yes. Of course it would. So, if you want to look at it this way, if you have everythingness here, okay, everythingness, where's somethingness? Okay, well, here's somethingness. All right? Somethingness is within everythingness. All right. Got to erase this board again. Okay. Now, so of those three options, what do we know? Well, we know we're not absolute nothingness. We could be in everythingness, but we're certainly somethingness. All right. Well, in a very broad way of looking at things, there is what appears to be a metaphysical dichotomy of sorts, meaning there are two things, both of which are mutually exclusive, meaning you can't have both, only one or the other. And the reason why it's one or the other is simply because that happens to be the case. There's no cause for either one of these situations, but it has to be one or the other. That's your choice. So you can think of this metaphysical dichotomy between absolute nothingness and everythingness. And nothingness would not be caused. And everythingness, let's just say for now, it wouldn't be caused either. So, which is it? Well, obviously it's not absolute nothingness, so we have to be in the realm of everythingness, right? Everythingness. All right, so why is there everythingness? Because that just happens to be the case. It just happens to be that way. It's an uncaused state. It just happens to be the case that we're on the everythingness side of the dichotomy instead of the absolute nothingness side of the dichotomy. Thank God, right? Yeah. All right, so here's the thing with everythingness. Everythingness includes within it somethingness. So somethingness is also possible. Everythingness includes everything that is possible, logically possible, in a material sense, but that also includes somethingness. How is it that the determination is made that one thing exists and not another possibility exists? Right? So there's got to be something that decides this question. What is made real and what isn't made real in the material world? You see that? Now, if you go to physics and ask that question, they're just going to be like, that's a philosophical question. We don't answer that. We're not going to tell you, why one thing exists and not another in the larger sense of something that goes beyond the Big Bang. Because we don't know. We can't tell you. We have no idea. So we're just going to tell you what happened from the Big Bang to now. But anything that was real involved in the Big Bang, we can't tell you anything about. Sorry. And so science is not a contradiction to a belief in God. The two can be harmonized quite easily. God is a metaphysical explanation for a physical problem, which is, why is one thing made and not another? Okay? So, what is God? God is the being responsible for deciding what is made real and what is not made real out of the infinite possibilities for material reality. You need a God to make this decision. Material reality can't make this decision on its own. This is why you need a God. And this is why it makes a lot of sense to believe in God. A lot. I know there's atheists and agnostics who will, go to their grave thinking there's no God. But the better argument is there's a God, because there has to be one. How else do you decide what gets made and what does not get made? So God. What does the Bible have to say about God? Well, interestingly, the Bible begins with the book of Genesis. And the very first sentence of the book of Genesis states, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? I'm reading this right out of the Bible. So, we're told in the Bible who God is. God is the creator of heaven and earth. God is the creator of material reality. That's who God is. God is the creator of material reality. Science needs this. Physics needs a creator. Physics doesn't need any other God, but they need this one. And guess what? The Bible got it right. This is the right God. This is the only one that makes any sense at all. Okay, so why do we need a creator? Right? One. Can't science explain everything? No, can't. Okay, why can't science explain everything? Well, if you look at modern cosmology and what we know about the universe, it started with the Big Bang. So you've got this, they call it a singularity, which is an infinitely dense point of matter and energy. All right, whatever that means. That expands at the Big Bang, at the moment of the Big Bang. All right, and it creates all space, time, you and me, everything material. It's created by this Big Bang. Now, do you ever ask yourself, well, why do we need a Big Bang? I mean, can't you just have a universe that always existed? A steady state universe that goes off in every direction infinitely, forever? Why do you need a bang? What's the point of this? Well, there's a big point. You need a bang because you need a start. A starting order. Something has to decide what amount of matter. How's it going to interact? Where's it going to go? What's it going to do? How does it interact with each other over time? And what will it eventually create? That's starting order. Right here. That's the starting order. You need something to give a starting order for the rest of material reality to base its existence on. That's why there's a Big Bang. You need a starting order. The idea that the universe is infinite and has always been here is disproved by the fact that there was a Big Bang. And in addition, there's a lot of arguments against that sort of state anyway. It's called a steady state universe. But one big reason is, well, I mean, if the universe is infinite in scope and there's infinite number of stars, then the light from those stars have had an infinite amount of time to reach Earth, and the whole sky ought to be lit up with all these stars. In fact, there shouldn't be any place you could possibly look where you don't hit a star. Well, that's not the case. See, the steady state infinite universe is not true. Instead, what we have is the Big Bang. And this requires a starting point. That's the point of the Big Bang. It's the starting point. You need a starting point for material reality. Materiality can take care of the rest. The laws of physics can take care of the rest. But something has got to tell it where and how does it start. Without that, It can't exist. So, who is God? God is that which tells the universe how and where to start. God gives it a starting order from which it can evolve into what we see today. But without God deciding that question, it can't exist at all. Okay? So, if you think of the dichotomy of everythingness versus absolute nothingness, let's assume we're in everythingness. Well, everythingness has got a problem. It still needs something to tell it where to start. If everything is like, well, I could be anything you want me to be. But you got to tell me what you want me to be. Who's going to do that? Who's going to tell me what to be? Someone's got to start something. That's God. God decides what gets started and what does not out of the infinite material possibilities for reality. And because of that, God has to be outside of material reality. God is not subject to time. He's outside of time, outside of material reality. God has to be outside of time and material reality because God is the one starting it. God has to have the power to create material reality. But God also has to have the decision-making ability to decide what gets made and what doesn't. That means God has a mind. This is what makes God God. It's the mind of God. If it was just some mindless mechanism responsible for deciding how things turn out, you wouldn't need a mind, and therefore you wouldn't need a God. But there is no mechanism that can decide that question. No physical mechanism without a mind that can decide that question. That's why we talk about God, because we're recognizing there needs to be a decision made, and that being must have a mind. Now, is it like you're in my mind? No. God is an uncaused being necessary for the existence of material reality itself. Not like our brains, but we can call it a mind because God decides. It's a very mysterious way he decides things, but he decides nonetheless. That's why we call him God. What kind of material mechanism could possibly determine what gets made and what does not get made? How would that happen? What kind of material, non-thinking, caused reality could do that? Well, see, the problem is anything that's caused has got to have a cause itself. So eventually you got to go down the line to something that's not caused. So what material thing that's not caused could decide the question of what gets made and what does not get made? There's nothing. Nothing can do that. You might have atheists say something like, well, everything's chaotic out there, and it's chaos and randomness, and that's what causes, the Big Bang and reality, and well, that's just magic. That's all that is. I mean, really? Randomness. How does it get random? What determines its randomness? There's nothing to say, something's determined its randomness. What you're talking about randomness out of thin air. That's what they're talking about. They don't know because there isn't anything that can do that. So, atheism is really an appeal to magic. Magic. Where's the randomness come from? I don't know. Who cares? We'll figure it out someday. Out of thin air. Poof. That's called magic. All right? So if you're an atheist, you're a believer in magic, whether you understand that or not. And I'm here to explain it to you that, in fact, you are a believer in magic. The problem with atheistic beliefs is this, that when you get down to it and you ask them, well, who makes the decision whether something's made or whether something is not made? How's that done? And they'll say something like randomness or chaos. And you say, well, how does that happen? And then they're just like, well, I don't know, it just happens. Well, that's an appeal to nothingness. That is an argument against a basic rule of philosophy, which is you can't get something from nothing. Now, that seems to be obvious. And it's true. But in the end, that's what the atheist is arguing. Something from nothing. Randomness from what? I don't know. Well, that's randomness from nothing, isn't it? Chaos. Chaos from what? What's causing the chaos? We don't know yet. Well, we'll find out something. Great. Well, that's just something from nothing. That's all that is. You see? So atheism is equal to magic. That's a belief in magic. Well, magic doesn't exist. Magic has no cause. That's why it doesn't exist. So, okay. At least in a material sense of magic. So, if you want to believe in magic and you want to say there isn't a God, well, that's up to you. But it's not a very sound belief system. Now, some people will claim that space is nothingness. Well, it's not. It's not nothingness. Outer space is a low-density form of reality. It's part of the Big Bang, and in the expansion of the Big Bang, some areas are less dense than other areas. Outer space is the less dense area. It's still something. It's not nothing. Nothingness itself doesn't exist. Can't point to it. Doesn't exist anywhere. The people who believe that the universe came from nothing and there's no God, they're just wrong. It's just a flawed belief system. It's a belief in magic. That's what it is. The theists, or the people who believe in God, have the better argument. Period. If you don't understand, that, then maybe you don't understand the arguments that well, and you need to learn more about them. Okay. So God has uh, certain attributes. There are certain things we can say about God. Um, all right. God is uncaused. Now, he'd have to be uncaused, because otherwise you could say, well, what caused God? All right. All right. But God is uncaused. God is not subject to time. God is a state of his being. Uh, there's nothing in material reality that we can point to and say that is uncaused, because everything is caused by something else in material reality. But God is not part of material reality. God is an uncaused, immaterial being. And he would have to be. In order to, decide something like the Big Bang, he'd have to be outside. I'm not meaning outside in terms of space, but outside that reality. He has to be outside of time itself. God is immaterial. He's not made of matter or energy. God is not made of anything. God is not a made thing. He's an uncaused being. So God is not made of material parts. If he was, he would be made. But since he's uncaused, he can't be made, which means he can't be made of material parts. So that's called actus purus. All right? God is pure act. He's not made of things. He's not a consequence of other things acting to make God. God is that which acts on everything else, but nothing is acted upon. God, actus purus. God is also singular. Singular. One God. Singular. Now, why is there only one God? Why not two gods? Well, if you think about what it is that God does, God decides what gets made and what does not get made. Well, if you had two gods, then they would be in competition with each other, and one could make something and the other one could undo it, or vice versa. And that sort of system of two gods doesn't work, because to be God, you have to be in charge completely of what gets made and what does not get made. You can't have a competitor. That's supreme power. So there can only be one God. That's it. God is also a mystery. He's a mystery. God is not a material being, so you can't say, we're going to go take a spaceship and we're going to go see God. He's not in the universe in the sense that you can go physically see him. He's not a physical being. This is why you can't see God. And you would never be able to see God, because he's not a physical being and can't be a physical being. If he's a physical being, then he's a made being. Then that means something made him. Therefore, he can't be God. See? God can't be something that he's made. So he has to be invisible in that sense, immaterial. He has to be. But that also makes him a mystery. God is uncaused. I can't point to anything that's uncaused besides God. What does that look like? It doesn't look like anything. Material things look like things. uncaused beings, God. That's a concept in metaphysics beyond science. Science deals with the physical, the material. Science can't deal with a necessary uncaused being, immaterial being like God. There's nowhere to go to study him or see him or experiment on him. It can't be done. God is an uncaused, immaterial being, and because of that, God is mysterious. But nonetheless real, because God has to be real. Because God is needed to decide what gets made and what does not get made. Out of the infinite material possibilities, you have to have a God. And that God has to have the ability to decide what gets made and what does not get made. And that's what makes him God. That's the attribute that makes him God, this ability, this mind. God has also other attributes, such as, let's see, omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. I need the three omnis. Omnipotence, all powerful. God can do whatever is logically possible in material reality. God is omniscient. That means God knows everything. That really goes without saying, because how could you have control over and create material reality without knowing what it is you're doing? So he knows everything about material reality. He knows everything, period. There's nothing else to know. If he doesn't know it, it's not knowable. Omnipresence. That means his control is everywhere. He's responsible for creating material reality, sustaining material reality, destroying material reality. He's responsible for the laws of physics. He can change the laws of physics anytime he wants, anywhere he wants. He just doesn't, except for certain circumstances, perhaps. We often call these miracles, but he's in charge of everything that happens. But he's also a timeless being. He's not subject to time. So you can't think of him like you would, a human being that's subject to time. God is not a human being in the sense of an uncaused being. Now, I could get into Christianity and, Jesus and Jesus is man and God, but that's for a different day. But the God creator is certainly not a human being. It's an uncaused being. All right. Let me erase this. In fact, in Christianity, at least in Catholicism, we talk about this particular creator God as God the Father. And then we'll talk of Jesus as God the Son. And then we talk about a third entity called the Holy Spirit in the Trinity. So these questions are for a different time. All right, but I'm just really talking about God the Father. That's what I'm talking about. All right. All right, so how do I know there is a God? Right? I can't see him. You can't show him to me. So why should I believe in something I can't see? And, that's a valid question. The answer is God, the existence of God is proven by logical deduction and reasoning. God is in the realm of metaphysics. Proof of God is not something that, is easily obtainable through studying material reality in the scientific sense. God is greater than the physical world and is necessary. So why do you believe in God? Because you believe God is necessary. That's why. Your logic and reasoning have made you conclude that God is necessary. And therefore, I should believe in God. So there are various logic and reasoning proofs for God's existence. I'll go through a few of them. I already went through one of them, which was you need a God to give a starting order to material reality. All right. Like the Big Bang is a starting order. Another argument is about time itself. A lot of atheists, they'll say that, well, time is infinite. It's always been around. Okay? And this or that is infinite. Well, the truth is that there's not a single material thing that any scientist or anyone can point to as having the characteristic of being infinite. Infinite in terms of material reality doesn't exist. It's not real. All things start. Even in modern physics, if you keep, getting smaller and smaller and smaller and chopping things down into smaller units, like down to atoms and subatomic particles and quarks, even physics accepts the idea that at some point you reach a limit. Things can't get any smaller. It's called the Planck scale, but it's the point at which there's nothing smaller that you could even prove exists to begin with. So modern physics relies on the idea that there is a point where things stop. They can't get any smaller. They become the smallest indivisible unit that there is. It's not infinite. Same thing with time. Here's a thought experiment that proves the point. If you thought of time as being infinite, then you could think of an infinite number of prior moments to the present moment in time, right? So if time were infinite, let's say, this is the present moment, and we're going to go backward in time, right? To an infinite extent, okay? An infinite extent. Well, the problem with this is that due to the nature of infinity, that would mean there was never a time where there wasn't a prior moment to that time. So there would have to be an infinite number of prior moments to the present moment if this were the case. Well, if there's an infinite number of prior moments, then you could never traverse an infinite number of prior moments in order to reach the present moment. Because by definition, infinity doesn't run out. So it just keeps going. So the present moment could never arrive if time were infinite. Because there'd be an infinite number of prior moments that you'd have to traverse to get to the present moment, which is impossible. You can't traverse an infinite number of prior moments because there's always a prior moment you haven't traversed. So logically speaking, time cannot be infinite. It cannot go infinitely backwards in time, an infinite regression in time. Because of that, then time has to begin. There has to be a start. Time is not infinite. There's actually a start to it, right here. And what do we call that? We call this the Big Bang. So there has to be a start to time. Well, what started it? Well, obviously it can't be something that's subject to time, because time itself was started. So the thing that is responsible for the start of time can itself be subject to time. So what material thing is not subject to time? Right? Every material thing is subject to time. Everything material is subject to time. Which means that which is responsible for the creation of time cannot be material. It can't be energy, matter. It cannot be something that physicists study. It's not within the realm of science. It is a non-material cause for material existence. And it's proven by the fact that time can't be infinite. So any of those theories you might hear about, the universe has always existed. Not true. Because if that were true, time would always exist. But we know time can't always exist, so that can't be true. Chaos started everything. No, it can't, because chaos is subject to time, isn't it? Because it's material. Well, it can't be chaos then, can it? It can't be randomness. Randomness is material. Right? That's also subject to time. Well, it can't be randomness, can it? It's got to be God. It's got to be something immaterial, not subject to time. That's why God is a better argument, and that's why you should believe it. Now, there are other arguments. There's hosts of them for the existence of God. I like this one because it's an easy one to understand. The Catholic Church has a very famous saint. His name is Saint Thomas Aquinas, and he's considered a doctor of the church. And among the bookloads of things he wrote, he was a genius. He also had what he called his 5 ways, or 5 proofs for the existence of God. Now, these have always been, well, not always, but they've been part of the church doctrine for a very long time, 1,000 years or so. It's always been there. Maybe not adequately explained to people, but it's there. So I'm going to give you 2 of his proofs. Okay. The first proof he has is the argument of the unmoved mover. Now what he says is, in the world, we can see that at least some things are changing. Whatever's changing is being changed by something else. If that by which it is changing is itself changed, then it too is being changed by something else. But this chain cannot be infinitely long. So there must be something that causes change without itself changing. This everyone understands to be God. So what this argument essentially says is, if one thing is moved by another thing, that other thing is also moved by a third thing. And you can keep doing this, backward in time as far as you like. But it can't be infinite. At some point, you got to come up against what's called the prime mover. The prime mover. It's that which starts everything else moving. But it itself is not moved. It's the prime mover. That would be God. God decides what is made real and what is not made real. God, and in deciding to make things real, God moves those things. But God himself is not moved. God is not material. So that's Aquinas' first argument for the existence of God, prime mover argument. A second argument that Aquinas makes is the argument of the first cause. Aquinas says, in the world we can see that things are caused, but it is not possible for something to be the cause of itself, because this would entail that it exists prior to itself, which is a contradiction. Well, of course, you can't cause yourself to exist, can you? How are you going to do that? If that by which it is caused is itself caused, then it too must have a cause. All right, cause. Yeah, we get that. But that cannot be an infinitely long chain. So there must be a cause which is not itself caused by anything further. This everyone understands to be God. So, it's similar to the prime mover argument, but it has to do with the causal chain. One thing is caused, it's caused by another thing. That thing is caused by a third thing. That third thing is caused by a fourth thing, and you keep going backward in time. But there has to come a point where that chain stops. And you come to something that is itself not caused, but that is the reason this chain exists. That is called the first cause argument. So, one of Aquinas' arguments for the existence of God is that God is the first cause, and that a first cause is necessary. See, Aquinas was no dummy. He was a genius. He understood that you need logical necessity to prove the existence of God. And that's what he's giving in these arguments. Because why else would you believe it? If it wasn't logically necessary. And God is logically necessary. And that's a point a lot of people don't understand about God. You can't get away from the argument for the necessity of God. You can't. You can put blinders on and pretend as if you don't need it and think, okay, things are done by magic, but you're only kidding yourself. God is a necessity for material existence. A logical necessity. You're stuck with God whether you like it or not. So you might as well believe in it. All right, God, first cause. All right, that was Aquinas' second argument. I'm not going to go through the other arguments. You can look them up. They're easy to find. The subject of God is a touchy subject for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who believe in God, and there's a lot of people who don't. But most of those people don't know these arguments. And I think if they did, there'd be a lot more people who believed in God. So I do hope that you understand these arguments and that you think about them and understand the implications. Here's another point I wanted to make was that when you think about time, time is something that does not exist unless there's matter or energy. Don't think of time as something that exists outside of the Big Bang. It doesn't. Have you ever seen anything material that didn't also have time? And can you think of time itself without thinking of matter or energy, something that's moving? I mean, what is time, really? If it's not, movement of stuff, how do you know time's even there, right? So time is not something outside of matter and reality. Time is something that's intimately connected to matter and energy. You can't have time without matter and energy, and you can't have matter and energy without time. But that being said, if you're talking about an uncaused being outside who creates material reality, you're talking about something that's also creating time. And it's not subject to time. It's a profound implication about God, but it's true. But we're human beings and we think in time. So these are metaphysical arguments. They're true nonetheless. God is necessary. And if you think about it, you'll figure out, from my explanation and from others, that is in fact true. But there's lots of traps that you can fall into where, your preconceptions may be wrong and need to be corrected first before you understand, why there needs to be a God. I think I've touched on what I want to touch on about, what the deal is with God. There's an awful lot of people, billions of people who believe in God, and there's a lot of people who don't. God's an important issue to understand. And it's important that you understand that you're better off and you have the better argument if you believe in God than if you don't. Now, that raises one last thing I want to talk about, which is something called Pascal's wager. Now, Blaise Pascal was a famous mathematician who came up with this wager, which on a common sense level makes a lot of inherent sense when you decide, should I believe in God? I just gave you the reasons why God is necessary, and if you understood them, you would realize, there's got to be a God. But a lot of people don't, they just don't get it. Keep knocking. No one's opening the door. So I'll give you a little more of a common sense reason to believe in God. Well, this has a little bit more to do with the Christian God, Jesus, God the Father. And that is that Jesus promises eternal life for Christians who follow him. Well, that's a great thing, isn't it? Because, how hard is this to understand, right? You got two choices, right? When you die, right? Oh, actually, there's a third choice. I forgot about this guy. Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. So, you got three choices. When you die, you're either dead and you're never coming back. That's this guy. Goodbye. Nothing to worry about. You're dead. No afterlife. Hey, live for today because tomorrow we die. It's all over. And you got this guy. He dies, but he goes to heaven. Eternal bliss, happiness, forever. Wow, that's pretty good. That's a good deal. The saint. He's definitely got it better off than this guy. This guy, well, he doesn't know that he's dead, so I guess it doesn't really matter to him. But look what he could have got. That's a heck of a lot better than this. Well, then there's the third possibility, which is, there is an afterlife, but you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and now you're in hell forever. Burning in hell. Oh, man, does that suck. It couldn't get any worse, right? All right, so you could go to hell And trust me, I know a lot of people who may very well be on that path. All right, so, who do you want to be? All right, who do you want to be? Oh, you want to be this guy. It's obvious. Obvious. Well, you may not believe that this guy is real or is even possible, right? And maybe you think, it's just going to be this, and I'm not going to worry about him because it's not going to happen, and it's just, I'll just do this. Or you could be really nasty and have like this guy. Not a good idea there, man. But, all right, so Pascal has this wager. Well, okay, given these options, what should you do? Well, all right. So, you live like a devil your entire life. You have a lot of fun, a lot of things you shouldn't do, and you know it. You're a mean, rotten person, but you get away with whatever you want. You're selfish. You're this guy. You had a great time in life because you didn't care about anybody else. All right, so you had a great life. It was very rewarding in that sense. You got to do whatever you wanted. So you had a high reward. Okay, your reward was high. Now you got this guy. Not quite the devil this guy is, but still, he didn't believe in God. He didn't care. He did whatever he wanted. He certainly wasn't doing what God wanted him to do. So he was pretty much doing whatever he wanted. Well, that's still a high reward, isn't it? High reward during his lifetime. High reward. So you say, well, when is this going to get better? Well, okay. Well, let's get over here. Man, this guy does what God wants him to do, which in terms of Christianity means loving your neighbor. It means not being selfish. It means praying and going to church. It means doing the right thing, what God wants you to do. Well, that's a real buzzkill, isn't it? Things are just aren't as fun. So life's harder because, you got to do what God wants you to do. And what he wants you to do isn't necessarily what you want to do. But you got to do what God wants you to do anyway. All right, well, so your reward in life, it's not as good as these two. All right, so you have less reward. All right. Well, you look at that and you're like, well, why are you picking this guy? These guys look better. Well, because of the second factor, which is eternal life. Question is, how long does this go on? Well, this goes on for eternity. So, your life is not, it's okay, but it's not that great. But then you go to heaven, and you have an eternity of eternal bliss. Extremely high reward. Right? Whereas over here, after you die, you get zip. Zip. That was it. Or in this case, right, you die, you're getting an eternity in hell. Eternity of low reward. A low reward. All right? So, if you do the math, and Pascal was a mathematician, so he did the math, and he said, well, a little bit of pain in life times a limited lifespan of, what's the average lifespan? 80 years? It's still a limited amount of pain and suffering. It's still limited. But an infinite amount of bliss or enjoyment in heaven is an infinite amount of enjoyment and bliss in heaven. Well, that's easy. This infinite amount of bliss easily outweighs this limited amount of pain and suffering. So this is greater than that. So the mathematician would say, oh, this is going to give you a much bigger number. In fact, it's an infinite number. Well, that's better, isn't it? Of course. So this guy here, there's no afterlife for him, so there's no infinite equation to solve. But he better be right. Because if he's not of punishment. That sounds terrible. Right? An infinite amount of punishment is definitely much, much worse than the limited amount of enjoyment he had in life from his increased reward in enjoying life times his limited lifespan of, let's say, 80 years. So mathematically speaking, obviously, you don't want to be this guy. Because a little bit of enjoyment you get in life from not doing what God wants is greatly outweighed by an infinity of punishment in hell. Okay? So the mathematician Blaise Pascal says, duh, this is the winner. In terms of mathematics, this is what you want to do. Infinite reward in heaven is always greater, mathematically speaking, than finite pleasure here on earth where you have a limited lifespan. See? And this guy, because I've already explained to you why there is in fact a God, this guy he's got a pretty good chance of being wrong. So when you look at these three options, which is the obvious choice? This is the best choice, mathematically speaking. So why wouldn't you believe in God? More specifically, why wouldn't you believe in Jesus? Your best reward is there. So, from a purely mathematical way of thinking about things, it makes mathematical sense. It makes, when you add up the sums, it makes sense to believe in God and believe in eternal life in heaven. It's a rational decision. And many billions make it. Billions. Maybe never heard of Pascal's wager. I don't know. I guess that's why I'm here. Pascal's wager. A very good common sense argument for believing in God, and more specifically, Christian God, or a God who offers eternal salvation, eternal life in heaven. All right. I can't possibly cover every objection there's going to be by every atheist and agnostic that you ever come in contact with. Okay. I can only tell you that I've looked at this issue very closely over a very long period of time, and I've heard every argument there is, practically speaking, against the existence of God. And my conclusion is the belief in God is a better argument than the belief that there is no God, or the atheist argument, or agnostic argument, however you want to look at it. And that's always going to be the case. Always. Why is that always going to be the case? Because there's limits to science, like I explained to you. Science can't go into the realm of the metaphysical, which is where you have to go to decide whether there's a God or not. You have no choice. You have to go to the metaphysical. Science, physics cannot answer why physics exists. It's not possible. Any physicist worth his salt will admit to that. He'll tell you it's a philosophical question. True, it is. But it's also an extremely important question, because you want to end up like that guy, not that guy. And if you're going to stay here, you got the worst argument, or a less good argument. So I wouldn't be here either if I were you. All right. Well, I hope you learned something. And if you have any further questions, I know this is a topic that there's lots to talk about. God knows, right? You can leave a comment below or ask me another question. Maybe I can figure it out for you. or answer it for you. All right. Well, take care, guys.